Good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. It's a pleasure to have you all with us today. My name is Sadiq Hamour. I'm Director of Financial Institutions at the Qatar Financial Center, and I'm pleased to be a part of this thought-provoking webinar. What is significant about our event today is that we will be exploring together two of the leading financial organizations, the Qatar Financial Center and Labuan IBFC, along with identifying new avenues of collaborating between us. We will also witness a virtual signing a memorandum of understanding between the QFC and Labuan IBFC to officially forge the agreement to develop a long-term cooperation in addition to boosting economic and financial sector ties between the two financial centers. The MOU, which will be shortly signed by Yousuf Mohamed Al-Jaida, Chief Executive Officer of the Qatar Financial Center, and Farah Jaafar-Crossby, Chief Executive Officer of Labuan IBFC, paves the path for multi-phase collaboration on certain objectives, including but not limited to marketing, awareness activities, and identification of mutually beneficial initiatives. Equally important, the MOU will enable the QFC and Labuan IBFC to explore a mutually beneficial framework to allow relevant financial institutions in the state of Qatar to operate in Labuan IBFC and allow the relevant financial institutions in Labuan IBFC to operate in the QFC. I am confident that we will learn more about the MOU and explore together lucrative opportunities that will further harness the ties between both financial centers through the webinar discussion that will be led by our esteemed guests. Please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Farah Jaafar-Crossby, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Labuan IBFC Incorporation. Farah, with more than 25 years of experience in wholesale financial services, has made significant strides in developing Labuan IBFC and strengthening its position as Asia's go-to mid-shore financial intermediation center. Without further ado, I will leave the floor to our key speaker, Farah Jaafar-Crossby.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and really this is such a momentous occasion. Yousuf and I met maybe two years ago now in Istanbul, and this is where we started talking about this collaboration. Last year we were COVID, but we decided this year to go ahead with it, and this is fantastic. We're really looking forward to the opportunity of working together with Qatar to building this MENA Asia bridge. But first, let me explain and share with you a little bit about who we are, what Labuan is, and what we do. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, where are we? We are an island of Borneo, Malaysia. So if you know Malaysia as part of Peninsular Malaysia and as Borneo, Malaysia, Labuan is an island of Borneo, Malaysia. It's a federal territory which is parked directly under the federal government. Malaysia is made up of different states, but Labuan is parked directly under the federal government of Malaysia. It's interesting to note that when we talk about Labuan and how it got its name, it is actually home to the world's one of Asia's deepest ports. And we always like to say that in financial services, let us be your first port of call. So Labuan actually means pelabuhan, which means in Malay, which means port. And so we've got 100,000 people in Labuan. It's not very large. Of course, the International Financial Center is a key economic driver, but like Qatar, so is oil and gas. We have a huge oil and gas supply base and service center. And really, this is where the port that shelters all the ships and the oil and gas ships come into play as well. Logistics, tourism, and retail trading. So Labuan isn't a very big island, but it is home to the second biggest GDP among all the 14 states in Malaysia, led by the economic development of the IFC and the oil and gas. Next slide, please. So if you look at Labuan IBFC as a cloud of laws that sit on top of the island, that is Labuan International Business and Financial Center. And unbeknown to most people, we've been around for 30 years. So the Malaysian government actually set us up in 1990 to intermediate trade, finance, and risk within Malaysia and beyond. We like to call ourselves a mid-shore center, and I'll explain to you in a subsequent slide what is this mid-shore, because a lot of intermediaries and a lot of people in the IFC world know either onshore or offshore, but not midshore. So I'll explain to you the balance of midshore, which is what we offer. It's robust. It's governed by the Malaysian Finance Ministry. So it's a statutory body. Labuan IBFC is governed by the Labuan Financial Services Authority, and the Labuan Financial Services Authority is a statutory body under the Malaysian Ministry of Finance. So it's robust. There's governing legislation that's passed by the Malaysian government, and it adheres to all onshore anti-money laundering and terrorism financing rules. So just to be clear, there is no arbitrage between Malaysia onshore and Labuan midshore when you're looking at AML requirements and rules. Next, please. This explains the Labuan Financial Services Authority tree map and how it sits under the Malaysian Finance Ministry. Next. So, okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about this midshore balance, right? Because when we talk about Labuan, we say midshore and everyone says, what does that mean? How does it fit? And really, you know, it's very interesting to note that the growth of Labuan has been exponential in the last 10 years as there is a need for quality jurisdictions and a need for transparency. The thing is, Labuan has never behaved in an offshore manner where you can have bearer shares, where you have over-the-counter cash transactions. That was never Labuan's, you know, modus operandi. And that's why in the beginning, from 1990 till, you know, maybe the year 2000, Labuan was not seen as a popular jurisdiction. However, as there has been this flight to quality, and as there is a need globally to ensure that your tax requirements are above board and there is transparency, and businesses are homed in a well-regulated jurisdiction, we have really benefited from this. So Malaysia, Labuan IBFC as part of Malaysia, adheres to all the protocols that Malaysia has, and Malaysia as ASEAN's leading trading nation ensures that all international protocols are adhered to. So this is the beauty about Labuan, right? And I always try and talk about it as a push and pull factor. There is always a push by business to make sure that everything is more convenient, more business friendly. But at the same time, being part of a huge trading nation like Malaysia, there is then the pull by the ministry to ensure that we adhere to these rules. And really, this is how the midshore concept came about, right? So we conform to international standards, we adhere to all information exchange, and yet we have a belief in proportionality of regulations. We have a belief we are business friendly, and we believe that, you know, we believe in partnership. We believe in partnership with business. So what you have within Labuan is this balance. And with this balance is coined the word midshore, right? So there's currency neutrality, there's tax efficiency. We are agnostic with regards to legal framework. So there's no reason why the British common law be the reference law for all transactions that an investor chooses to use in Labuan. We're open to ADR. So it's a very flexible, agile, agnostic system that allows for foreign ownership and yet sits within one of Asia's largest trading nations. So really what you have here is a quality jurisdiction. Next slide, please. So this again shows you our international memberships, you know, OECD, all the international memberships of multilateral supranational organizations we are members to. By the fact that we are members, we are part of Malaysia. So for example, when APG and FATF come to assess Malaysia, they assess Labuan. Labuan is part of Malaysia's assessment. Again, it is important to note that this is where that balance is struck, right? We boast a comprehensive suite of legislation. The last review of legislation was in 2010. That was brought to the Malaysian government. So as you can imagine, it's very updated. So we're home to Asia's only, for example, private client foundation. which also allows for Wakaf foundations, private client Wakaf foundations. We're home to Asia's only protected cell company. And, you know, there are a lot of different, and as far as Sharia is concerned, we have a Sharia omnibus legislation, which allows for all the structures and solutions that are available in Labuan to be offered in a Sharia compliant manner. Next slide, please. Those acts that I mentioned earlier in the previous slide create this complete ecosystem. So we have IBCs, international business companies. We're home to now 60 plus banks. We are home to more than 220 licensed intermediaries, almost 200 private client foundations, and hundreds of trusts, which are non-registered. Trust companies, we call them trust companies, but really globally they're known as TCSP. So these are your company secretaries. We're home to about 67 of them. Leasing is a huge business for us. Capital markets, digital markets, which I will go through a little bit in a bit, and commodity trading. In total, our ecosystem is home to more than 800 license holders. It is a very deep ecosystem and a very wide ecosystem. And really a lot of our license holders use Labuan as a base to enter into Asia or to use Labuan as an exit point from Asia into the world. Next slide, please. So this talks about our fiscal structure and corporate entity benefits. As you can imagine, income from a Labuan trading activity is taxed at 3%, which is extremely competitive. Especially in this day and age where paying tax is seen as it's equitable. You know, the whole notion of tax now is very different from when I started out in this business, I can tell you. So now it's important to be seen paying a certain level of tax. And of course, the other thing that's unique about Labuan, aside from the fact that it's mid-shore, is the fact that we have very clear economic substance regulations. So the Malaysian Parliament has passed a gazette about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, to state that if you are adhering to very clear full-time employee requirements and domestic spend requirements, you're then eligible to the 3%. A lot of other jurisdictions have taken the opposite route, and they have said that that whatever is adequate at time of assessment is deemed adequate, and then is where your tax kicks in. For us, it is a very simple exercise to ensure that you have domestic spend and you have a full-time 1 or 2 or 3 full-time employees in Labuan. The other thing that's important to remember is that Labuan is not an incentive. Because all the incentives and because all the benefits of Labuan is enshrined within acts, it's perpetual. It is perpetual for as long as the Malaysian government does not rescind these acts, right? So that is important to note. It's perpetual, it's not an incentive. So of course there is exemption on withholding tax and dividends, interest, royalties. These are all completely tax exempt. We also have access to more than 70 double taxation agreements that Malaysia has. Again, this is the benefit of a mid-shore. And you have access to live in Malaysia via a Labuan entity. And you have obviously things like complete foreign ownership. So there's no domestic ownership that's required within a Labuan entity, be it just a box standard IBC or a licensed entity. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk you through, and this is a bit of a scoop because this is new, about our 2020 financial highlights, right? One of our key areas, and 2020 really has been defined by these 3 words: agility, adaptability, and alignment. Agility in the way the regulator has taken on the challenges of COVID, adaptability in the way that we have engaged with the market, and alignment, the fact that we've been aligned to all international standards has allowed us to move forward in 2020, pandemic notwithstanding. Digital financial services is something that is growing leaps and bounds in Labuan. We are now home to 62 digital licensed intermediaries. 4 new digital investment banks were approved last year, and 30 licenses were approved. These are not Malaysian licenses, Malaysian-based licenses. These are Asian licenses, and some of them are European-based licenses. And the stream continues. And I can, just to share a little bit, The reason why Labuan is seen as so digitally friendly is because of our ethos. We believe that the distributed ledger technology, which is the base or the operating system of all things digital, and I use the word digital very, very purposely. It's not fintech, it's digital. So everything that is sat on a DLT is accepted in Labuan. So there are no sandboxes in Labuan. The regulator is able and willing once they go through your business plan, and they will go through it very carefully with a fine-tooth comb, believe me. But once they approve it, then you are ready to go live, right? We have a toolbox of historic legacy licenses that we then use for digital requirements. And I give you a classic example. So for example, we have the credit token business, which was a historical license under one of those acts that I mentioned earlier. And this token license is now used to issue security tokens. So STOs are issued via our legacy token license. We also have money exchange license, which we use for crypto exchanges. And we have a primary and secondary listing platforms, which was historical, and now we're using it for digital assets. So at the moment, for primary and secondary digital assets issuance and secondary trading, we have 3 exchanges already up and running in Labuan. So the digital financial services is a huge area of growth for us. And yes, I must admit, we have to be extremely careful with who we let in. And the regulators have been very, very careful. Although you note that we have 62 licenses in total and we issued 30, we might have rejected about 300% more, the ones that we allow in, right? So just to be clear, our level of scrutiny is there, but we are open for digital business. Next, please. Insurance. Now, insurance and risk management is interesting in Labuan because we started out as the first right of refusal for Malaysia, but since then, more than 60% of all the premiums that are coming through Labuan are actually international. So what has happened with Labuan is that we have managed to curate a very wholesale, bespoke solution and license, a license selection in Labuan. At the moment, Labuan is home to more than 220 licenses. Our gross premiums went up by 4.5% last year. Takaful's gone up by almost 14%. And it's interesting to note that Labuan is home to more than 55 captives, and captives are self-insurance vehicles. And we're now licensing a quarter of all captives in Asia Pacific and the Middle East. And this is something where I think, you know, Qatar and Labuan can work together, where we can see how we can leverage off each other's knowledge and each other's potential market in order to grow, especially the area of Takaful captives. Takaful captives is something that we allow in Labuan and yet hasn't seen enough uptake. Personally, I would really like to see growth here, and if we can work with our friends in Qatar, that would be fantastic. We're also the only Asian jurisdiction to offer the protected cell company structure. So insurance, again, and risk management is a huge area for us. And it's an area we really like, especially in the Islamic space as well, and we'd like to work very closely with Qatar on this. The next slide, please, and that will talk about our Islamic highlights. So Labuan is an Islamic leader, and actually Labuan was used as a test bed for the growth of Islamic financial services for Malaysia. A lot of what Malaysia is known for in the Islamic space germinated out of Labuan. So Labuan is home to the world's first US-denominated sukuk. And together with the onshore, we work very closely with the onshore regulators in order to ensure that our leadership, Malaysia's leadership, when I say our, I mean Malaysia's leadership in Islamic finance continues. Again, we have an omnibus legislation, and we have a very unique Sharia council. We have the Sharia Supervisory Council, which is not merely an advisory council. So the Sharia Supervisory Council is able to give advice as to the Sharia acceptance of a particular structure. So Islamic deposits in Labuan, we're home to about 20 Islamic banks, including conventional banks with windows. So we have Islamic banking windows within conventional banks in order to really encourage Islamic banking. And that's increased by more than 8% last year. Our gross contribution to the retakaful industry, as I said earlier in the previous slide, was 14%. And Islamic listing and capitalization in one of our primary and secondary exchanges, which is the Labuan Financial Exchange, the Islamic Sukuk represents 23% of all that. So I think that really, you know, when we're looking at the MOU, the growth that we can possibly see by mutually benefiting in the Islamic space, in the risk management space, and in the insurance space, the risk management space, and the digital space are the key areas that we're working with. We hope to work with Qatar towards growing this bridge. Next slide, please. This slide really talks about our strategic direction in 2021 to 2023, but it's really business intensification, responsive regulation. So really, you know, when we look at IFCs and the bespoke nature of financial wholesale intermediation, you can't run from the fact that what is important really is that personal touch. And having a one-stop regulator within the Labuan Financial Services Authority is key to that. Of course, we will continue to profile and increase our visibility. And of course, our organizational efficiency, delivery efficiencies will be key for us going forward in order to continue to give our users, the kind of quality service that they have been accustomed to receiving. Next slide, please. So my last slide, really, why Labuan IBFC? Regional opportunities. You know, even in pandemic, in our pandemic times, Asia is still growing. And this can be seen. Next week, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be launching our market report, which is really our report card for 2020. And, you know, and just as a sneak preview, I can share with you that we have grown tremendously in 2020, and we're very proud of that. And that is off the back that the fact that we are located in the center of Asia. Asia, we are very, very blessed to be in Asia and to be able to grow together with Asia. So efficient and flexible tax system, clear, very, very clear requirements for substance creation in order to ensure that tax efficiency, transparency, commitment to international regulation. So we're well regulated, and yet at the same time, we're very business friendly, and we believe in proportionality of regulation and the ease of doing business, obviously. The wide array of structures and solutions as provided by those acts passed by the Malaysian government, together with our tax efficiency. That has been the key towards, that has driven Labuan's success. And not to forget our partnership. Our partnerships with Qatar is going to be key moving forward as we drive in the MENA region, and as we assist our friends in Qatar to drive their Asian agenda. You know, as progressive as we are, I think Yousuf and I believe that if we make a bigger pie, there will be more for everyone. And I think that's key. So thank you very much for your attention. And thank you very much to Yousuf and the team at Qatar for this MOU and this agreement. And we're really looking forward to working with you on this. Thank you.
Well, that's very interesting. Thank you very much, Farah, for the insightful introduction about Labuan IBFC. I believe there will be a significant synergy between Labuan IBFC and the QFC, given the common objectives and goals. Now, please allow me to welcome our esteemed speaker, Yousuf Mohamed Al-Jaida, the Chief Executive Officer of the Qatar Financial Center, who will take us on a virtual tour to the QFC, the gateway for Qatar's flourishing markets and beyond. Over to you, Yousuf.
Thank you, Sadiq, and thank you, Farah, for your presentation. Very detailed, very enlightening. I learned 10,000 more times about Labuan from the couple of slides you just shared, but very interesting. I'm really proud of what you've done in Malaysia, and I think Labuan has become one actually of the most progressive financial centers in Asia, and hence our reach out to you today to further collaborate on financial initiatives. I'll do the same, give you an introduction about the Qatar Financial Center. Won't be as detailed, but I'll try to touch upon most of the points covered in the Labuan presentation. Yours was more that you had a lot more statistics in it. I won't be doing a lot more statistics, but I'll give you a high level basically presentation on how we operate and how we do things here in the Qatar Financial Center. But as you can see here on this slide, that's the skyline in Doha. It's 2021. It's a 2021 skyline. In 2000, maybe, and let's say 15 years ago, none of that skyline existed, with the exception of one or two buildings at the far right, which is probably the Sheraton Hotel and the Four Seasons Tower. But this just tells you how Qatar has grown in the past 20 years and is soon to be the host to the World Cup 2022, 1 year from now. So that shows you how much progress we've seen in a very short period of time in the state of Qatar. And why do we do business in Qatar? Basically, of course, every financial center has its pitch to its clients, and our pitch is simple. We like to pitch Qatar as a stable, growing economy. As you know, Qatar is the largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, and that happens to be a fuel that is growing into the future. And Qatar continues to invest in LNG, liquefied natural gas, and today we happen to be the largest exporter globally, with some competition, of course, from the US and Australia. But we also have one of the highest GDPs per capita, thanks for the wealth that's come from basically natural resources and the way the wealth has been managed. So our economy is one of the most stable economies in the entire MENA region. We have very high credit ratings, and I think that's important when it comes to doing business and having a conducive business environment, especially with a lot of the uncertainties we see globally in the Arab world and beyond the Arab world. So stability is one very strong point that we usually pitch Qatar to our clients. Our second basically strength, I think, is that we are an ambitious country. We have grown rapidly in the past 20 years. The government continues to basically invest in infrastructure. We today have one of the largest airports in the region, connected to more than 260 countries globally. Qatar Airways is a very well-known airline, which probably flies to most of the Asian capitals, including basically, I think 3 stops in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. I know there's a direct flight to Langkawi. There's one more that I cannot recall, but I'm sure there's one more. But anyway, the government continues to invest in infrastructure. We have a very modern metro that was established 2 years ago. And as you know, we are the first Arab country to be hosting the World Cup 2022, which will put us further in the map. So ambition, stability, and I think safety is a very important feature nowadays. We are one of the safest countries in the region, and we are one of the most peaceful countries in the region as well. I'm sure if you look around in the Arab world, there's a lot of unpredictability, a lot of political issues, and these tend to basically increase and decrease depending on what year you're in. But Qatar has always been stable, politically safe, which basically allows people to do business in a very friendly environment, which is also, I think, important for sustainability of businesses. So that's our pitch. Usually, when we talk to our clients: stability, ambition, and safety. Next slide. Of course, that was Qatar, but within Qatar, of course, we represent the Qatar Financial Center, which is one of the platforms that allows 100% foreign ownership within financial services, and some of the sectors that, of course, contribute to the development of financial services as well. You can see the picture of our tower. This is a tower that hosts our offices only, and we do not have a physical geography, meaning that companies are spread out all over Qatar. which basically enhances and confirms that we are an onshore environment because companies are located onshore in the country in various areas, different towers, different geographies, meaning we're part and parcel of the mainland economy. And I think that's one of the differentiating factors for our financial center, that it is virtual in terms of its legal environment, and it's parallel in terms of its physical nature. So we like to pitch ourselves as a virtual onshore legal environment. And again, the tower only represents administration. There's probably a couple of companies with us in the tower, but there are 90% of our companies are spread out outside the QFC tower. And again, that emphasizes onshore, and we've done it like that on purpose so that people do not basically brand us as an offshore center, even though 20 years into the making, there are certain ideas out there that the QFC is still an offshore center. But again, with knowledge and with basically practice, we try to continue to market ourselves as an onshore environment. And I think the physical part of it is very important, being, you know, spread out without a designated location, even though we realize that, you know, having a certain cluster is, of course, has massive benefits, but nothing stops us in the near future to create our own cluster within certain sectors and areas if we wish to, but within the mainland economy and geography. Next slide. So again, this is maybe slightly different from the Labuan structure, but as you can see, we are 3 independent entities. Myself represents the one in the middle, which is the authority. It's called Qatar Financial Center Authority. You can think of us as the strategic and business authority. We operate the business and strategic side of the Qatar Financial Center. But as you can see, we have an independent board of directors, which is represented by a minister, meaning they are part of the cabinet, which again emphasizes the onshore part. Currently, it's the Minister of Commerce. Previously, it was the Minister of Finance. That recently changed just a week ago. But the Minister of Commerce is the chairman of the KFC and is also the minister, which gives you a flavor of how aligned we are with the onshore environment. So policies are aligned with the ministry in terms of FDI strategies and basically marketing Qatar as a destination for business. So the legal and tax environment, the business development, employment, immigration, commercial registration, and licensing, all of that belongs within the authority. So we market, register, license, and basically manage a set of rules and regulations related to employment, immigration, companies laws, etc. There's more than 50, 60 rules and regulations that apply within the Qatar Financial Center, and a lot of them are managed within the Qatar Financial Center Authority. The second part, of course, our sister organization, completely independent, chaired by the governor of the central bank, again, emphasizes the onshore, I think, element, and they regulate and supervise all the financial activities. We share the same tower, we share the same strategy going forward, but we operate completely independent of one another. And again, all the financial institutions within the Qatar Financial Center and all the anti-money laundering activities and monitoring of that happens within the regulatory authority. Again, chaired by the governor of the central bank, which oversees all the mainland banks and the QFC banks from basically both his positions. Again, a lot of alignment in terms of policy and strategy going forward. And believe it or not, if we go 15 years back, chairmanships on these organizations were completely different and independent from the government. which gave basically a perception back then that we were an offshore center, because there was no link with the government whatsoever. We were completely independent. But 5 years into the making, the government realized back then, especially at the financial crisis, that it was time to integrate with the government, link with the government, and share a common strategy with the government, and hence representation from the government on the chairmanships of those boards. Last but not least, we have the Qatar International Courts, again, English common law, 2 courts, civil and commercial courts, and the Dispute Resolution Center. And this is headed by Lord Thomas, actually. Lord Philip is the previous one. But again, this is part and parcel of the, is integrated into the local courts in the background, operates independently, but reports into the Supreme Judicial Council in a dotted line format, meaning that all determinations and decisions by the Qatar International Courts are enforced locally in the local courts and into the local system. And we have judges appointed by the Supreme Council Judicial into the Qatar International Courts with a local enforcement judge. So again, our courts, I think, is a huge differentiating factor in that they are able to operate locally and enforce locally. And none of the decisions are usually challenged by the local courts because they both recognize each other. So this gives you a flavor on how we operate. Again, on the top umbrella is the Council of Ministers, which we report to in terms of numbers, budgets on an annual basis, just to keep them apprised. As a matter of fact, any rules and regulations within the Qatar Financial Center Authority and the courts are usually done within the Board of Directors. There's no need for an additional approval from the Council of Ministers, which makes us very efficient in terms of amending our rules and regulations whenever required, which also allows us a lot less bureaucracy when it comes to implementation. In terms of financial services regulations, some of those regulations require an additional Council of Minister approval after the board approval of the regulatory authority. Next slide. So simply, again, our vision and mission. We've put this vision and mission 4 years ago with our new strategy. And our vision is to transform Doha into a leading global financial and commercial capital. We haven't said the leading, we said a leading, because as you know, there's many financial centers popping up all over the place. I think there's not a single developed or emerging nation nowadays that doesn't have a financial center. So rather than competition, I see complementing each other is probably a better word. And I don't think in this fast world that we live in, that you can have only one leading financial center. We have seen what has happened in Hong Kong and in London. Things can change overnight. So I would rather be one amongst many leading financial centers rather than trying to become a leading financial center. So it's important to distinguish, and I think hence the MOU today we have with Labuan, I think recognizes that they are amongst one of the leading, of course, financial centers in Asia. And I think if financial centers in the MENA region and Asia can collaborate, then we can definitely create a better global financial system and global financial world for all of us. Our mission, again, is to drive economic development. This is more that has to do with our local economy. We want to assist in driving the economic development and diversification by providing a world-class commercial, legal, and regulatory environment. Straight to the point. The KFC was established in 2005, but mainly to drive economic diversification for the country, to open up, to ease up, and to allow foreign ownership into the country. We were probably one of the first platforms of the country that allowed 100% foreign ownership. Even then, 100% foreign ownership was very restricted in the ministry, very restricted in other parts of the countries. There were certain exemptions for multinational oil and gas companies, a couple of law firms here and there, but 100% foreign ownership was only first introduced into Qatar through the Qatar Financial Center. But again, nowadays, 100% foreign ownership is a common theme everywhere. Even the ministry and other economic zones in the entire country also allows 100% foreign ownership. I think that's a good thing because FDI has always been beneficial to help economies diversify and grow. So today, for 20 years into the making, we are one of the most established probably platforms in the country, but there are many more in the country allowing 100% foreign ownership in many other sectors beyond financial services. So financial services is no longer the only sector open for foreigners, but we have many other sectors, including manufacturing, including media, including technology. But again, those come in other economic zones. Next. And it's important, of course, to basically paint a positive picture to the government when it comes to our type of business. Again, there's a lot of misconception usually. I'm sure Labuan has gone through that initially, but you can always sense a threat from the local companies, assuming that, you know, letting foreigners come into the country would basically take away a piece of the pie and create a lot more competition. Of course, there's a lot of business interests at stake. So we should always have a story available, a positive story, when that type of picture is painted. And for us, it's straightforward. We are basically one of the platforms that contribute to the strategic attracting of foreign direct investment into the country as a financial center. We support the diversification efforts of the state of Qatar and help basically the country to diversify away from oil and gas. We also allow high-skilled people to basically come into the country and contribute to the economy. If you look at the population makeup of Qatar, 75% or maybe 80% is blue-collar labor due to the intensive investment into infrastructure that has been continuing for the past 15 years and will probably continue for another 10 years. So you have a huge blue-collar component in the country that makes up most of the population. So one of our missions that we usually tell government officials, tell the media, and tell the private sector is that the Qatar Financial Center creates more white-collar jobs into the economy and hence benefits the economy positively. So that's a very important, I think, message that we convey to the country locally. And on top of that, we say that we have a huge impact on the economy and we help contribute and develop the financial services sector in the state of Qatar amongst the local regulators. So these are 5 key messages that we use locally. I'm sure some of those messages are familiar to Labuan as well, but there is always, you know, business interests, media, government officials questioning the sole purpose and existence of the financial center. So these are our 5 contributing positive messages to the local economy. Next. And this is basically our menu of incentives or benefits when it comes to allowing businesses. We share a lot of the things you've already conveyed in terms of Labuan, but in terms of number of companies, we have grown massively in the past 5 years. We have taken a more lenient approach in terms of allowing companies. If we look maybe 7-8 years back, we were operating on a case-by-case business without having a very transparent set of permitted activities. We had to have basically some sort of contribution to the financial services sector that had to be measured through a quantitative methodology and a qualitative methodologies. That was 70 years back, but we have taken an approach that any type of company, whether it's a new startup, whether it's an established brand, whether it is two people leaving their jobs, trying to establish a venture and go into business in the country. We would allow anybody who's willing to establish themselves and do business in Qatar, and hence we have seen a massive pickup in terms of number from 2017 to 2021. We have more than 1,000 companies today. 10% of them is financial services in terms of banks, insurance companies, and asset management companies and financial advisories. 90% are distributed amongst professional services, sports companies, tech companies, legal firms, and corporate solutions in terms of holding companies, SPVs, foundations, and to a lesser extent, trust as well. But again, our benefits is usually our legal and judicial framework, which I just explained. English common law, of course. We're the only platform that allows English common law. What we're trying to do differently as well is to extend the English common law to the rest of the country. So it becomes allowed and optional for two parties outside the KFC to use the KFC courts if they dictate that in their commercial contracts. So that's one area of expanding our legal and judicial framework. Again, 100% foreign ownership is important as well. We have no withholding taxes, but we are a taxed environment. Again, we're an onshore environment. We don't want any basically disruptions or differentiation between our jurisdiction and the local jurisdiction. So we charge 10% tax on locally sourced income, which is pretty much the same tax equation in mainland. There are certain exemptions, of course. We incentivize, for example, asset management. We don't have any withholding tax. 90% government-owned companies are also exempt from tax. Any company that's 90% and above owned by Qataris is also exempt from tax. And most of this is to align with the onshore jurisdiction so that there is no discrepancy. So we would try to match onshore tax policies as much as possible. And like I said, the onshore thing is very clear in terms of our geography. Our companies are spread out in various areas in Qatar. If it's a designated building, we call them designated buildings, and we continue to designate buildings, then you can locate in that building. So we're not in the business of real estate. We just designate appropriate locations and allow companies to make their choose and make their pick. Again, ease of setup is important. We have a one-stop shop. You just have to be, there's one floor where you can actually fill out an application, get your commercial registration, get your license, get your driver's license, get all your immigration needs on one floor. I think that's important. And we have a dedicated call center for any issues that may arise either before or after. And we get a lot of calls. A lot of the establishments are foreigners who come into the country for the first time. So they probably have questions as simple as, where can I get my driver's license, or where can I take my kids to school, or where can I rent an apartment? So we have a call center to address some of these queries for basically companies post-establishment and pre-establishment as well. So we have a client community. We usually basically gather with our clients at least once quarterly through roundtables to discuss their certain sectors, and through events. No events since COVID. A lot of the events have been virtual. But the client community aspect is very important to us. We like to listen to our clients. We allow them a consultation period on all of our rules and regulations when they come out. It's a 90-day consultation period. So we're very engaged with our clients. We have a lot of onshore difficulties that require us to be as close to the client as possible to help them address their problems. I can give you one example on that. That's probably maybe familiar in Malaysia as well. But a lot of the companies that come into the Qatar Financial Center want to go into government tenders, and they have to talk to government officials in terms of submitting their papers. At certain points in time in the past, their papers were not recognized because they're KFC commercial registrations. We have to get involved. The lawyers get involved from the government side, saying that KFC companies are not recognized. we have to go and try to amend local law. So there's a lot of dialogue between us and government officials to facilitate and help our businesses to do business locally and not just regionally. And a lot of the companies that come into the Qatar Financial Center actually want to do business locally, on top of course, some regional activities as well. Next slide. Again, I touched upon this. We try to, of course, this is, plain vanilla for any financial center in terms of corporate structures and activities, but we have recently even tried to go beyond certain sectors. So some of the new areas we're looking at is, of course, media. Of course, there's a lot of permissions required for media. So and there's a whole set of regulations that need to come out. So that's one area that we are willing to basically expand into for the sake of the World Cup 2022. But there's, of course, rights, there's distribution rights when it comes to media. There's other permissions that we currently don't have, which we basically can seek from the Council of Ministers. Another activities that we're looking at is basically sports activities that have to do with the World Cup and e-commerce as well. E-commerce is a tricky one because there's trade activities happening, and within the current rules and regulations, the QFC, a typical sales transaction, if it's not a professional service being provided, can have legal prohibitions. So we have to basically make sure that our set of permitted activities continue to develop and continue to upgrade based on the needs of the local economy. So we have added a set of new activities as well in the last board meeting, allowing companies to do further activities than the plain vanilla menu on the screen over here. Last slide, of course, the geography when it comes to companies is important. What we tell international clients is that you have access through Qatar to a 2 trillion market. Of course, the entire MENA, Iraq, Kuwait, Oman, including Southeast Asia, Pakistan, and Turkey. We believe that companies that base themselves on the financial center can do businesses in those countries swiftly and easily. We have very good G2G relations with those countries. We have very good trade agreements with those countries. So it becomes very easy to basically base yourself in Qatar and do business in those locations. Of course, Qatar Airways flies into all these locations. Africa is also maybe a further market, but a place that we're also looking to collaborate with. And hopefully, of course, with our collaboration with Malaysia, Labuan, I think we can become a more connected center to the Asian continent. And if we do basically look into the future, I think we can reach a point where financial centers can start passporting into each other, something similar to what you have in the European Union, as long as rules and regulations, which happen to be very similar nowadays in the global financial world, especially when it comes to banking, investment banking, Islamic finance. And if there is that comfort of having a unique, similar set of rules and regulations amongst countries such as Qatar, Malaysia, Turkey, then there is no reason why we can have some sort of passporting mechanism that works for companies that are based in those locations. So I think that was my last slide. Thank you very much. We're looking forward to this partnership. And Farah, it's been amazing to reconnect with you virtually. We'd love to see you physically next time once the pandemic is behind us. But we're excited about this, and we're looking forward to working closely with your team and yourself. Thank you for having us today.
Thank you so much, Yousuf, for this captivating overview on the Qatar and the QFC. Undoubtedly, the QFC and Labuan IBFC are characterized by their vast opportunities, spanning different sectors, which represent key catalysts to accelerate the wealthy ties between the two financial clusters. It is time now for the virtual signing ceremony of the MOU between QFC and Labuan IBFC. Congratulations, Farah and Yousuf, on the promising agreement.
Great. Congratulations, Farah.
Yeah.
Congratulations. It just doesn't feel as good as it would if we were shaking hands at the moment, I'm sure.
Social distancing, what can you say?
How can you say? But please, once this is over and we're all able to travel, it will be fantastic to host you and the team here in KL and in Labuan. Really, I do believe there's a lot of synergies that we can have. And I think the most important part is that we both believe in partnership. And that is the way forward.
Definitely. Thank you, Farah. I appreciate it. Ramadan Kareem.
Ramadan Kareem.
We hope to see you stay healthy and stay safe. And we hope to see you after, hopefully, the pandemic.
You too. Take care of yourself and the team there. Thank you very much for today. We appreciate it.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm pleased to be part of this outstanding MOU signing, and I'm looking forward to having both PFC and Labuan colleagues working closely towards achieving a better future for the business community. Thank you also to our valuable guests who joined us in this celebrating the momentous occasion, which marks the starting point of a distinctive business relation between the both organizations. Thank you all. Have a good day and stay safe.